Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our final virtual Charlotte County Through the Decades program. I hope that you've been watching us across the Centennial year, and if you haven't, you can certainly go back and watch them. They are all available on the Community Services YouTube channel and accessible through the Libraries and History website. So I thought today, since we're kind of coming up to the present here, talking about the 2000s and the 2010s, I thought I'd pick a subject that is something of interest, fascination, terrifying, destructive, all at the same time here in Southwest Florida, and that is hurricanes. And when we think of hurricanes in Southwest Florida, in Charlotte County, of course, we think of Hurricane Charley, right? We could say BC before Charley, right? If you were here before then, if you were here after that, it certainly is one of the most significant events to impact Charlotte County across its entire 100-year history. And so what I'm going to do here is just talk a little bit about the hurricane for those that either weren't here, or just some interesting facts, even if you were here for it, but some things that you may not have known about the storm, and then kind of just talk about hurricanes in general and this continuing impact. And by the way, before we get started, in case you can't recognize where we are today, Peace River behind, right, looking out towards Charlotte Harbor, and then to my left, to the right of the screen, just down a little ways, that's Hurricane Charley's here in Punta Gorda, and so, right, of course, named after the storm came through. Very nice restaurant, so go check that out when you're here. All right, so some fun facts, and again, hurricanes are both fascinating and horrifying, and something that impacts the United States on a regular basis, particularly here in Florida. So 5 things that you may not have known about Hurricane Charley, and I'll just give a little overview and then we'll go into the 5 facts. So Hurricane Charley was the first hurricane of the record-breaking 2004 Atlantic season, and one of 4 major storms that would leave Florida in shambles, right? So it's not just Charley. Charley is going to be the first. Then you've got Francis, Ivan, and Janine. So 4 hurricanes, 1 year, within a couple of months, are all going to impact Florida in some way, shape, or form. And Charley is a Category 4, and it was the first Category 4 to hit Florida since Opal in 1995. Interestingly enough, that was a name that I had not heard of when we think about the history of hurricanes. Charley was also the strongest hurricane since Hurricane Andrew to hit Florida in terms of its intensity, its wind speed, all right, all of those things. And it was and still is the strongest hurricane to ever hit Southwest Florida, so this region in particular. All right, so that's kind of our big overview. So fact number 1, the storm strengthened from a tropical depression to a devastating hurricane in 4 days. 4 days, right? So August 9th, this is Tropical Depression 3. By August 13th, it makes landfall on Florida's southwest coast as a strong Category 4, right? So, you know, and this is really, when we think about hurricanes, we think, oh, there's a lot of time, and of course now, you know, with the National Hurricane Center and the Weather Service, and we have all these, you know, we can track these things, but 4 days really does not give you a lot of time to understand the path of the storm and to prepare for the storm. Like Hurricane Andrew, Charley was a compact, intense, and fast-moving hurricane that rapidly intensified before making landfall. The storm became a hurricane on August 11th, was a major hurricane packing winds of over 120 miles an hour by August 12th. Peak intensity was 150 mile an hour winds just before making landfall on Cayo Costa, just west of Fort Myers, right? So that is the actual first landfall point, right? And, you know, this idea of a compact storm, this is actually going to prove beneficial, right? If you were here for Charley, or if you were here right after Charley, or have kind of that memory of it, right? You know that it moved through Florida very, very quickly, within 24 hours, right? And although it was very destructive on the ground when it came through, the fact that it's not slow moving, right, that certainly is a benefit in terms of storm surge, in terms of winds, everything. Okay, fact number 2. Charley passed directly over Orlando as a hurricane, forcing Disney to close. So So after hitting Southwest Florida, Charley moves in, and it actually follows the Peace River corridor. So if you are familiar, and I think I've talked about the Peace River a little bit in some of our past videos, but if you look on a map, right, the Peace River, which ends at Charlotte Harbor, right, follow it back up, right, and we're looking at going through DeSoto County, right, and then into Hardee, right, so we're looking at Fort Ogden, we're looking at Arcadia, Wauchula, right, follow that path. That's the path that Charley follows. So even though the destruction here is very well remembered, I don't think a lot of us think about inland, right, and the destruction that was caused there. Now, it does move very quickly, but even because it moves so quickly, it retains the hurricane strength. And so when it hits Orlando and Disney, it is actually still a hurricane. It's not a hurricane. It's not a Category 4, but it is still a hurricane. The Orlando International Airport recorded wind gusts of over 100 miles an hour. And before Charley, Disney had only closed once prior to that. So this is Disney's 50th anniversary, so opened in 1971. It had only closed once prior to Hurricane Charley, and that was for Hurricane Floyd in 1999. But because of the record-breaking season that was 2004, and because of the 4 hurricanes that hit Florida, Disney is going to close again for Francis, Ivan, and Janine as well. All right, now let's hope my papers don't blow away here as we stand on the harbor. So the storm never loses hurricane strength as it passes over Florida Peninsula. Fact number 3, right? It moves so quickly that it never had time to weaken to a tropical storm. It was still a Category 1 hurricane when it passed over New Smyrna Beach and back out over the Atlantic. And again, this tells us that the damage is not just limited to the coast. When we think of hurricanes, we think of the coast. We think of surge. We think of coastal communities impacted. But in fact, Charley, because it moves so quickly and retains that hurricane strength, the inland, the central part of Florida is also going to be affected. And this is going to do devastating work to the citrus crop in Florida, not just with Charley, but with the others as well. Fact number 4, there will never be another hurricane named Charley, right? I'm sure most of us out there watching are familiar with the fact that the Weather Service retires names depending on the intensity. So a storm like Katrina, for example, right? There will never be another Atlantic hurricane storm named Katrina because of the destruction, because of the deadliness. Charley is one of those. And in fact, the other 3 hurricanes that hit Florida that same year in 2004, all 3 of those names were also retired as well. Fact number 5, and for those of you that were here during Charley, that experienced Charley, this may be, well, it couldn't be any worse. Well, fact number 5 is it could have been worse. And how? Why? How could it have been worse? Because Charley was not supposed to hit the Charlotte Harbor Peace River corridor, right? Where was Charley supposed to make landfall? Where were they predicting Charley would make landfall? Tampa Bay, right? And we all know, and even though, right, this is now, 15 plus years ago, we all know the population of Tampa Bay, that metropolitan area. So imagine if a storm like Charley, Category 4, very high intensity, strong wind, imagine if it had hit an area like that, right? And in fact, when it did change course and impact Charlotte County here, right, and the central part of the state, Tampa Bay was actually completely left untouched. So there was no storm surge, and they didn't feel, they hardly felt anything. Charley was a compact storm, and hurricane force winds extended out only a few miles from the center. I believe what I was reading earlier, 7 miles was the radius. That was essentially the center and the width of the wind and the highest intensity of the storm. The hurricane's quick forward motion meant the highest winds lasted only a few hours. And along vulnerable coastline, storm surge topped out at about 13 feet. Now, 13 feet is still a lot, right? And we all know, those of you that have either lived here for a short period of time, like myself, only 2 years, those of you that have lived here 40 years, right, you know that even when it rains heavily, or if there's a tropical storm, right, you know that the area is impacted that. So 13 feet is not insignificant, but put it in comparison, when Hurricane Katrina hits, they are looking at over 20 feet of storm surge, right? And so there's a dramatic difference there. So this could have been worse. Again, it was the high intensity, compact nature of the storm that moves it very quickly and limits, quote unquote, the damage. Now, I do have a couple images here for you. Again, those of you that were here, I'm sure you remember these all too well from the news, but this is the cone, right? This is the path. So you can see Charley's path here, right? The entire Gulf Coast is all in red, right? And you can see just from the cone how compact of a storm it is, right? If you look at something like Katrina, and I know I keep going back to that, but you know, Katrina was this massive storm, and that covered a very large area. But Charley is very, very small in comparison, but small, but still deadly. And then I have the other hurricanes. So this kind of just gives you, gives you a little bit of a graphic of those other hurricanes, right? So after Charley, which hits in August, then you have Francis, you have Ivan, and Janine. And all of those are going to impact Florida in some way. Now, not necessarily the same way as Charley when it comes to Charlotte County, but they are still massive storms. You can see that from the radar. So what about the damage here, right? And, you know, again, for those of you that were here, I'm sure you have very vivid memories of that damage, of trees, you know, right? 150-mile-per-hour winds, even if this is a fast-moving storm, right? That we're talking about leveled trees, we're talking about down wires, right? There were people in Charlotte County that had no power for almost 2 weeks. Right, so this is a very, and even if you were more on the fortunate side, you're still talking several days or up to a week without power. Right, so I just wanted to show you, and these are images from our online archives, which, as I've mentioned before in past videos, you all can access through the Libraries and History page. So, here we go. So this was the home of U.S. Cleveland, who was a local historian here in Charlotte County, right? And you can see the home was almost completely destroyed. And in fact, it's because of Hurricane Charley and because of the damage that his house suffers that U.S. Cleveland gave. He had already given materials to Charlotte County. Many of the materials in our online archives, by the way, the photographs are from his collection. They are things that he gave us. But after Charley, you know, I think he was so worried that what if the house had been destroyed? He still had tons of archival material and historical material, and so he then gave the rest to the county. So, you know, sometimes hurricanes have fortunate or fortuitous results, and I think in that case, you know, that is certainly true, at least for Charlotte County and for our historical record. You know, we talk about Punta Gorda and we talk about the Peace River Corridor being impacted, but Charlotte County was impacted across the board. In West County, this is the Placida bunkhouse in its original location before it was moved to its current location at the head of the Cape Hayes Pioneer Trail. We are very fortunate that this structure was not destroyed. I know it looks like it is, and it certainly wasn't in great shape prior to the storm, but we are very fortunate that that structure did not get destroyed. Because we do believe that it is one of the few remaining and possibly the only bunkhouse, railroad bunkhouse left in the entire state. So very fortunate that we still have that resources. Now, there were things that were destroyed, that were lost, historical buildings that were lost. This is up in Fort Ogden, right? This was obviously a photo taken prior to 2004. And the building was completely destroyed by Charley. Again, and I think this speaks to the devastation that continued as Charley moved inland, right, where it did not lose that hurricane strength. So often we hear, right, it makes landfall and it drops, and the wind speed drops and it drops to a tropical storm, right, but that didn't happen here. And so the devastation does continue inland as well. In the old town of Cleveland, which is just north of Punta Gorda on 17. George Brown's house. George Brown, I don't know that I've mentioned him in past videos. Very significant figure in Charlotte County history. it was George Brown who sold the land that became the Charlotte County Courthouse, which is down here in Punta Gorda. His house in Cleveland, picture was taken in the early 1990s, and his house was completely destroyed by Hurricane Charley. But yet then we have something like the Tribune Land Sales Office, which is now in the History Park by the Punta Gorda Charlotte Library. That building survives. The Cigar House, which is also in that same park, that survived. So there are some of these historic buildings that survive, and then others that don't. Other buildings in Punta Gorda that were lost, the Punta Gorda Herald building, the original Punta Gorda, or I think it was the second or third incarnation, but it was from the early 20th century. That building was lost. The First Baptist Church in Punta Gorda was lost. The Charlotte County Memorial Auditorium, which the Event Center has taken the place of, that was lost. Hotels, businesses, there used to be a lot more hotels along 41, including one that was just over the bridge here, to just kind of next to what is now Live Oak Park, Live Oak Point. Gone, right? We have images of that. So if you are interested, whether you were here or not here, if you're interested to kind of see more and of that devastation and the recovery, right? So, with hurricanes, we tend to focus on the devastation, the destruction, and there certainly was a lot of that here. But we also want to think about the reconstruction, right? And if we think about Punta Gorda, downtown Punta Gorda today, even parts of Port Charlotte, right, where there's been that recovery, where you do have new businesses and a new look, right? Sometimes disaster can wipe the slate clean and provide an opportunity. And if we think that, there's been times in American history where this has happened. Think about the Great Chicago Fire. Think about the San Francisco earthquake, right? Where you have complete destruction, but then you have the foundations for the new, the modern, right? San Francisco today or Chicago today, they are built on the foundations of that post-recovery, that post-devastation recovery. And I think downtown Punta Gorda, there's some of that here too, where it's a new look, where there's an opportunity, and create something that did not exist before. So, and although Charley is our focus today, I mentioned the other three of 2004, and, sadly 2004, which was a record-setting year at the time, has since been surpassed, right? Think about 2005, which is very deadly. That was where Katrina. There's been other deadly seasons as well, and there's been other deadly hurricanes that have hit Florida. Most recently for Charlotte County in this area, Hurricane Irma in 2017. There might be more of you out there watching who might have been here for Hurricane Irma versus Hurricane Charley. You can let us know in the comments when we post the video. But Hurricane Irma, although not a Charley, that hurricane was also very destructive, very deadly, and it was a massive size. If you look at it on, I always think it's interesting to look at the images that are taken from the space station of these hurricanes, because you really get a sense of how large they are and just how much nature brings, right? The planet is here and this planet is active, and hurricanes are certainly evidence of that. So if you want to see more, go into our online archives, type in hurricane, and you'll get a lot of different images, mostly about Charley, and a lot of different things, but there will be some in there about Hurricane Donna that hit this area in 1960, and then there's also some in there about Hurricane Irma as well. So this concludes our virtual series, our Charlotte County through the decades virtual series that we've done for the Centennial. I hope you've enjoyed it. Again, if you've missed any, or this is your first time watching, please go onto the Libraries and History website and check out our past videos. They're all available there on YouTube. The final Charlotte County Through the Decades program is going to be an in-person event. So if you are interested, and if you'd like to kind of hear, we're going to do a look back. That's kind of what I titled it, is a look back on Charlotte County Centennial. So I will be doing those at every branch. So that's Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte, Mid-County, and Inglewood in December. They are already posted on our website, on the Libraries and History calendar. They'll be at each of those library branches. So please come on in. If you have been watching our videos and are interested, or if you haven't and you just are ready to get back inside and do in-person programming again, which we certainly are. So I hope to see you for those. And thank you so much again for watching our Centennial videos. And hopefully we'll see you in person in the future for our remaining program.